Welcome to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. This is Tim Derling, and I'm just a big classic rock nut with a lot of classic rock vinyl. If this is your first time tuning in, thank you for tuning in. If this is not your first time, if you've seen a bunch of the other episodes, thanks again. Either way, glad to have you along on this episode. Like all my other episodes, I'm going through my classic rock vinyl collection, which is all my vinyl collection is. Going through the vinyl and talking about it, talking about the back covers, front covers, inserts, and anything else that comes along. So, in this time around, we're going to take a look at a band known as the Bad Boys of Boston. Of course, I'm talking about Aerosmith. Nothing particularly rare from Aerosmith. Most of their albums were pretty big sellers, but we're going to talk about them. First up, here's the first album. Came out in 1973. All of these early albums on Columbia, CBS Records, of course. Early version of their Wings logo up here. And like a sky background close-up shot of the band. There's a reissue of this album that exists that came out about 3 years later after Dream On had become a hit single. It took about 3 years. This picture of the band takes up more of the album. It's a different logo. Not the standard Aerosmith logo, but it's like a red logo, and it says Features Dream On right on the front cover. Back cover, this is a Canadian edition, like most of my records are. Song titles, a little bit of credits, a write-up about the band, and some pictures of the band there. Let's see what's in here. My copy here just has a plain white sleeve. Like most of my albums, again, this is Canadian. This is just a regular Columbia Records version of this album. Red with Columbia written, the little I logo all the way around. That's the first Aerosmith album. Second one, 1974, Get Your Wings. This is an early version of their classic Wings logo, just in A here. Looks like a tonsils, almost like bat wings here. Black and white shot of the band, Get Your Wings written in red. And because this is a black album cover and it's quite old, a little ring wear. You can see the shape of the record. A lot of my records have this. It's pretty hard to avoid. There's the early Wings logo again. Song titles, credits, and not much else at this point. White sleeve, Columbia logo. Third album, 1975. This was the first big Aerosmith album. Toys in the Attic. I like this album cover a lot. Aerosmith are a band that I like. Obviously, I like them. Not all of their cover art is great, in my opinion, but I really like this one. This cover was done by an organization called Pacific Eye and Ear, and what you have is a toy chest full of toys with a little kid climbing up with a set of keys like he wants to play with the toys in the attic. Now here, this is the Aerosmith logo the way it would be written, but they hadn't quite gotten to the wings, putting the wings with the logo together just yet. Toys in the Attic written here. This is like a brownish, almost like a fabric look. Back cover. This is the picture of the group in that same attic, presumably. Song titles up here, band members, and credits down here. This again is, I believe, I can't really tell. It's kind of blurry on the bottom. I was trying to see if this was an American edition or a Canadian edition. The record itself should tell me. Columbia logo, yes it is, in the small print. CBS Records, Canada. Makes very little difference in this case. Fourth Aerosmith album came out 1976. Generally considered to be one of their best. Rocks. Just 5 diamonds, I guess, to represent each member of the group. There's that same logo again. They hadn't gotten the wings yet, almost. Rocks in quotations. Rocks, of course, is another name for diamonds, or it could be Aerosmith Rocks, like musically. Joe Perry apparently wanted to call this album 5, but was talked out of it, presumably because this was their 4th album. It would have been funny if they had. Back cover, there's the logo again, song titles, credits, Canadian edition. Still haven't gotten any inserts inside Aerosmith albums, just plain white paper sleeves, at least on the copies that I have. So there we go, there's the Columbia records. If you've ever noticed the inner band here, the part that the needle doesn't play on, the takeaway, I guess, on a turntable, the needle would get to the end of the side, and then it would lift back. There's usually something inscribed in here, and in this case, I just thought I'd look at this one just randomly. It's got the catalog number, not a big deal. So where is the classic Aerosmith logo? The one that they still use today. It made its debut on an album on this, 1977, Draw the Line. I love this album cover. It's a classic caricature of the band by a guy named Al Hirschfeld. I mean, you can easily make out Steven Tyler, Joe Perry, Joey Kramer, Brad Whitford, Tom Hamilton. Almost like a Mad magazine type. And there, it's small, but there it is. There's the Aerosmith Wings logo that they would use for pretty much the rest of their career. Draw the Line. This again is a Canadian issue. Nothing much to talk of, just the song titles on the back cover. And this time around, for the very first time, because I guess they'd achieved some success, they actually have an inner sleeve. There you go. One of the classic rock logos of all time. This one's in gold. And there's the credits, just all in black. Still just a standard Columbia record. There. 1978, like most bands, they did a double live album. This one was a little bit different. They called this one Live Bootleg because there were a lot of bootlegs at this point. And this is an example of an album that you can tell, I can tell, is a Canadian edition without looking at the back cover of the record itself, because it's got English and French down here. Contains 2 records, contient 2 disques. Bootleg stamped on it. It's supposed to look cheap, like a bootleg. It's kind of how the record sounds too. It's not the greatest of song quality. On the back cover here, I like this. Like there's somebody left a coffee cup here. The stains. Song titles are sort of like stamped on. Everything looks like it's stamped on. This Canadian edition, as you can tell by here. This is the first Aerosmith record to be gatefold, and this has a lot of cool live pictures of the band. It's interesting to look at these if you know anything at all about Aerosmith. This was a very, very tumultuous time for the band. Weren't getting along, a lot of drugs. There's some cool shots of them on stage. Just check out the instruments they were using. So let's see what's inside each half. All right, forgot about this. We'll look at that in a second. Look at the records themselves right now. The pictures of the band. A little bit of information. Side 1 and side 2, some credits. Typical Columbia pressing. No, we'll do the other record first. More pictures of the band. If you like looking at things, it's fun looking at old pictures in the background. Doesn't matter if it's a rock band or of anybody. There's some Sprite cans there. It looks like a Coke can. I'm sure that's what the guys were on, was Coke and Sprite all the time. Side 3, side 4. There's the song titles and the credits. And I'm sure this Columbia, just a regular Columbia record here. Inside Live Bootleg came cool poster. 24 by 24 poster of the band on stage, and some smaller pictures on the bottom there. Example of some of the cool stuff that used to come with vinyl. Gave it a big leg up on any other format at the time. 1979, close out the 70s with not a widely known album, one of my personal favorites. Night in the Ruts. What does Night in the Ruts mean? It's a bit of what they call spoonerism. Reverse the letters. Yeah. Here's a picture of the band as coal miners. They don't use their logo. It's like it's scrawled onto this the walls of this coal mine. the Night in the Ruts album cover is not the first place that this picture was presented. In 1978 they released kind of a standalone single, great song called Chip Away the Stone, and the sleeve cover featured this album, or featured this picture. Back cover, another picture of the band as minors. This is another Canadian edition in the small print down here. There are the song titles written along the top. This one's interesting because for whatever reason the song titles aren't written in order. So there's more pictures of the band, some credits. Back cover, there's a merchandise form. So you could order songbooks, like the sheet music, t-shirts, patches, more t-shirts, sun visors, a pin, and another poster. It's not the same poster that's in my bootleg. And here are the Aerosmith albums up to this point. And here's the record itself, Columbia Records version. 1980, I think to this very day, the single biggest selling Aerosmith album, the one that's been certified diamond, is this album. Aerosmith's Greatest Hits. Doesn't get any plainer than this. It's just their logo, half their logo, Aerosmith's Greatest Hits written on the top. Of course the other half is on the bottom here. Again, this is a US version. This isn't actually a Canadian version, which is odd for me. What have we got inside here? Oh yes, I've had two versions of this. One, the record cover sort of deteriorated, so here's a really beat up version of the vinyl, and here's a better version of the vinyl in a white paper sleeve, still just using the Columbia logo. We're not going to get into all the changes in Aerosmith very much. Of course, this is a time when band members changed. Temporarily, as it turns out. 1982 is the next Aerosmith album. Rock in a Hard Place. Of course, picture of Stonehenge on the cover. Insert Spinal Tap joke here. Logos in red and yellow, which is a little bit different. Back cover. Some very, very hazy, in more ways than one, pictures of the group. This has a gold stamp on it for promotion only. Owner. Ownership reserved by CBS. Sale is unlawful. And this is a US version too. It's a little glossier cardboard on here. Of course, we are getting into the 80s. Things tended to get glossier in the 80s. Let's see what's inside of this thing. Okay, so here is the credits and the band's albums. Curiously, doesn't include Greatest Hits on here. On this side, logo and the lyrics to one song, the Prelude to Joni. Why they just printed the lyrics to one song on here, I don't know. Just have to ask them, and honestly I doubt they remember. Here's the vinyl itself. Next up, 1985, label switch from Columbia to Geffen Records, and their first Geffen album was this, Done with Mirrors. If you've never seen this before, you're probably thinking, what does that even say? It says Aerosmith, Done with Mirrors. It's backwards, and in the background there's this guy that looks like he's bending the tines of a fork with his mind. Everything on this record, everything on the cassette, everything on the CD, backwards, printed backwards. Oh, yeah, and it's upside down too, just to further confuse the issue. So in the background there's a picture of the band, song titles, Canadian issue, even the Geffen Records logo is backwards. The only thing that isn't backwards on here is the serial number, and on the spine, which I know you can't read from there, the actual catalog number is not backwards. It was a gimmick. They didn't use their logo. Didn't really go over that well. Even the way that the record typically comes out, if you have a picture of the band logically the record would come out of this end. Oh no, not done with mirrors, it comes out the bottom. And there's that picture again, everything backwards. So this is what's seen on the front cover in full. This is what's seen on the back cover. And this is the first record that will look significantly different because of the label change. This is a usual Geffen Records release. Now, on this, on the label of the record itself, the Geffen Records logo is not backwards. And again, the catalog number is not backwards. Probably legal reasons why they had to do that. In '86 and '87, Columbia released Classics Live and Classics Live 2. I don't have those on vinyl, at least I don't have them on vinyl at this point. The Aerosmith's big comeback album happened in 1987, and it was this one, Permanent Vacation. This is one of a handful of records I have in my collection that's never been opened, and it will remain that way. I've always loved this artwork. Many of you have seen this. This was a famous album. Guitar, money, core, a guitar chord in this graphic, a big spider. There's like a lizard, pair of dice, a knife, some cigarette butts, like a mermaid, and it kind of repeats. And on the back cover, this is a Canadian edition as well. There's the song titles, more of the same graphics, some credits. And the cassette and the CD have a picture of the band in jail, and I think another picture of the band. I'm sure it's no different, but I'm not going to find out because this is one of my unopened albums, and that way it shall stay. Usually when a band switches labels, always when a band would switch record labels, especially if they switch labels and went on to become more successful, their previous label starts releasing old material, and Columbia did that a lot when Aerosmith switched to Geffen. Geffen did the exact same thing when Aerosmith switched back to Sony Music. And in 1988, Columbia Records released this called Gems. Gems, of course, written out in diamonds, Gems. Nice big red Aerosmith logo. What this album is basically the best of whatever didn't appear on the Aerosmith's greatest hits. This is a Canadian edition. Song titles, whatever minimal credits were there. Inside this sleeve, this is all of the Aerosmith Columbia albums, so you don't see Done with Mirrors or Permanent Vacation on here, certainly, up to and including Classics Live and Classics Live 2. This is an order form for Aerosmith's appearance live at Texas Jam 78. You could cut out this order form and mail away for it. I have this videotape. Oh, also video scrapbook. I have both these videotapes. The Texas Jam is a horrible concert. If you want to know why people shouldn't do drugs, watch a great band sound really, in my opinion, bad on the Texas Jam video. Just my opinion. And still a Columbia logo. It's a little bit more, the printing is a little bit more modern looking. One of Aerosmith's most popular albums, of course, 1989, Pump. This is a very glossy cover. It took me a long time to find this on record. It's not one that you see that much for as big an album as it was. Probably sold more cassettes and CDs. And this isn't a reissued version. This is an original. This is a US version. But it's not like a reissue version. Picture of the band, song titles, a little bit of credits, Geffen logo. Let's see what's inside here. This picture, it's an alternate take of the color picture that's inside the cassette and CD. I don't think this album, or this picture, is in the cassette or the CD. This is just for the record. Song title's written down the side here, and just a close-up picture, guy pumping gas with a pump tattoo. And it's a typical Geffen Records logo and label on here. This vinyl, of course, is relatively new, even though it's 25 years old at this point, in really good shape. I have one more Aerosmith record to show you. In the early 90s, record companies stopped printing vinyl in mass quantities and eventually stopped doing it altogether, until, what I'm happy to say more recently, is a trend towards reissuing vinyl to regain interest in it. In European territories, in the UK, they still continue to make vinyl. So, 1993, Aerosmith released this album, Get a Grip. Some of you may have thought this wasn't available on vinyl. Well, it was. What I've got here in my hands is I believe this is printed in Holland, so this is Get a Grip on vinyl. It's actually on 2 records because there's so many songs on this album. And this version has 2 songs on it that were B-sides that didn't make it onto the cassette and the CD. Can't Stop Messin', and I guess Can't Stop Messin' was the only one. I thought this had Don't Stop on it too, but it doesn't. Can't Stop Messin' was a song that was a B-side of, I believe, Living on the Edge. So let's see what's in here. This actually just has 2 completely different sleeves, one on top of the other. This graphic is inside the cassette and CD, the head with the nails in it, and this guy pulling his face apart. Look at this. Even though this is a European version, it still has the regular standard Geffen Records logo on it. Now, because the songs are spread out over 2 records, the bands, each song, really wide bands on this, and the band is, you could look at lines on here. If there were 6 songs inside one, you could see 6 different spots. This one only has 3 because there's 3 songs on it. Next up, picture of the band, and these are the lyrics to the songs. And the same logo on here. Again, very wide bands on the songs. Let's Get a Grip. Now, there are other Aerosmith albums that exist on vinyl. These are the ones that I have, and the idea of Tim's Vinyl Confessions are the ones that I personally own, are the ones that I talk about. I do have one more thing to talk about, one more piece of vinyl that is Aerosmith related. In 1979, Joe Perry left Aerosmith for a few years and formed his own band called the Joe Perry Project. They released 3 albums, 2 on Columbia, 1 on MCA. I have the second one of those albums. This came out in 1981, the Joe Perry Project. It's called I've Got the Rock and Rolls Again. And you don't see Joe Perry Project vinyl very much. So it says the Joe Perry Project, and it says here, I've Got the Rock and Rolls Again. It's a picture of Joe with his guitar case. For some reason there's like a ball cap and a pair of handcuffs hanging on here. If you only had the cassette and CD, you may never have noticed that before. The back cover is a picture of the band, song titles. This is a Canadian edition. Came upon this quite by accident. And there isn't anything in here, just a plain white sleeve and a typical Columbia logo. Aerosmith, there's not much to say. I mean, they're one of the biggest rock bands ever. Continue. They're still around. They're still on tour. If you're not familiar with their earlier stuff, I would start with the old greatest hits, the one with the half logo on the red and white. I would start with there and then go back. And also, I would check out the 3 Joe Perry Project albums. There's some interesting stuff on there. And also Brad Whitford, the second guitar player in Aerosmith, in 1981, he did an album with Derek St. Holmes, who was singer and guitarist in the Ted Nugent band, off and on. They did a one-off album called Whitford St. Holmes. Again, I don't have that on vinyl either. Other than that, I hope you've enjoyed this edition of Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Keep checking back for more episodes, and thank you for watching. Have a great day.